So again, my name is Guy. I'm going to go through a little bit today. Gosh, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff. So as we go along, ask questions, all that good stuff. But I'd like to start out with my company, our people, what we do, all those good things. It's really cool. It's a great environment, and I just, I love that picture, so I like to start with it. So the two things that we do at Inova is grow our people. Our number one objective over everything else that we do in our facility is to grow our people and focus on our people and make sure that they are at the very, very top of our priority of making our company successful, making them a part of them being successful, and so on and so forth. Secondly, we make everything we do as simple as possible. And there are obviously two separate things. We have growing our people, and we also have making things as simple as we possibly can. But in reality, when you are doing these two things, you will grow an incredible company that will be more successful beyond anything that you can imagine. And ultimately, those are our two main things that we do. So just so everybody has a little bit of context, we're a pretty niche manufacturer as far as what our product is. So we make high-end Murphy beds for Disney, Marriott's, Ritz, developers, different things like that. It's a really cool product. We're super passionate about it. We have all of our own patents on all of our own mechanisms and everything that we do for them. So just to put a little bit of a face with the name. Here's our factory. When we started out, about 18,000 square feet. We're at 74,000 square feet now. And again, putting things into context, because I know we have custom cabinet shops, we have large 100,000 square feet places, all these different types of things. I want you guys to have a good understanding of where we're coming from. The other really cool part that I like to bring up while this plays is how calm everything is within our facility. So when I talk about growing our people, number one, I talk about the fact that I want to make things that they do easy for them, simple for them. They're highly trained in what they do. They know exactly what they need to do, and nobody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off trying to do it. All right, so thank you very much for the introduction, sir. Again, I served 2 deployments in Iraq. I was in the Marine Corps for 8 years. My second deployment, 14th IED, finally got me and touched me and blew me up and all that good stuff. And long story short, I came back and went through a very long rehabilitation time frame. It took me about 3.5 years, tail end of my Marine Corps career, to start to be able to walk again, get off crutches, go through all the surgeries, all those different things that I had. But the great part about it is those 8 years that I spent in the Marine Corps taught me so much about people, and not just being this person that you go see for 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and then go away from. We're obviously a brotherhood, we're a family. So I got to spend, I got to eat with them, sleep with them, do all kinds of things with them. And it was so shocking to me when I finally went into a civilian environment how non-close everybody was, how detached everybody was from one another. And in reality, even if you're only spending 40 hours a week at your facility, which I know probably a lot of us here do way more than that, it's amazing to me, these people that you spend so much time with, you know so little about. And it took me, about 6-8 months to a year to really start to comprehend how little we know about these people that we spend so much time with. And that was one of the biggest things that we focused on when I first transitioned into a civilian career. To tell you a little bit about Inova, when I started, we were, again, 18,000 square feet. We had 12 employees, and I think one was leaving our facility about every week. It was just a hire them, chew them up, spit them out type of place. We didn't have any standards in place. Nobody knew anything that was going on. Nobody had been trained, and everybody was just blamed for everything. And it was a horrific environment to be in. In all honesty, I probably wish I was back in Iraq than to be in that place. It was so bad at that time. We were also about $400,000 in sales. 7 years later, fast forward, we're 72,000 square feet. We have 53 employees. We have a 2% turnover rate, and this year we will clock in at $19 million in sales. So what we're going to talk about today isn't a myth, it isn't a theory, it is absolute, it will work. You just got to have the open mind for it. To tie into that, some of the awards that we've received over the last 3 years, our biggest one for sure, and something we're still blown away at and just by and can't really wrap our heads around it, was Disney Supplier of the Year for 2017. And that's such a big award because, number one, everybody here knows about Disney, but that's out of 35,000 suppliers. And the reason we did that is because we take our philosophy of how we treat our employees and making sure that they're growing and the respect that we have for one another, and we take that and we put that in tenfold into our customers to make sure that they fall within our standards and what we do. And we were super, super honored to get that award. We're also in the top 100 woodworking companies for 2017 and 2016. We were the People's Choice Award in 2016, which was really great. I was fortunate enough to get the 40 Under 40 Award in 2016. And then last but definitely not least, Capital District Softball Champions 2018, which I'm super proud of. All right, so what are we going to get into here today? Or tonight, I should say. We're going to focus on creating a prosperous and motivated culture. The biggest focus that any company should have. Taking stock in our staff and interviewing, so looking at who do we have with us now, what type of people do we want to bring into our facility, being goal-oriented, so our employees are on board, making sure that they're a part of our goals, that they're actually contributing to those goals, empowering our employees, which is probably one of the bigger topics we're going to hit on. I know that's something that we all kind of struggle with a little bit. Staying in our lanes and servant leadership. It's going to be really good. Staying in our lane is a great one. And then what type of leaders are we and how do we lead our people? And then continuous improvement or marginal gains, because it's a great way to be able to get your people involved, create that culture, et cetera. Training and where to start. So I asked two things tonight, this one being more important than the next one, but big ears, big eyes. We can go into any situation, we can listen to anything, we can walk into any factory tomorrow and tear it apart, right? We can be skeptical, we can be pessimistic, and we can point out all the bad things and, oh, this stinks, and why are they doing that, and all the blah, 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 blahs. But in reality, we're not here to tear things apart. And one of the biggest things that I don't understand is why people do that. We've all come together to talk with one another, to create relationships with one another, and hopefully walk out of here learning something. But we can't do that if we're shut down. So all I ask is that we have big eyes, big ears. Don't criticize, don't critique. Look at the positive things, look at the value that's in it, and take those things that you can take back to your facility. And it's been pretty cool because everybody who I've talked to so far tonight seems extremely enthusiastic about things, ultimately enthusiastic about employees, company engagement, cultural engagement, all those type of things. And then the second thing I ask is please ask questions. Don't wait till the end. I want to talk about your guys' issues, struggles, things that you're like succeeding at, doing really well at, and I want to talk about it as we're going along. Again, I think we're going to gain the most value out of this when we're having a little bit of a dialogue with one another versus me at 8 o'clock at night after we've had a few drinks and just ate some food and everybody just sitting there kind of tapping out. So please, if you guys have struggles and different things that you want to talk about, bring them up, cut me off, do whatever you got to do. Let's go over them. All right. So taking stock in our staff and interviewing. Absolutely the first step in building the correct culture. So Good to Great is an incredible book, but it talks about the right people on the bus. We take it one step further. Number one, we want to make sure that we have the right people on the bus, and to explain that a little bit, we want to make sure that we have people that fit within what our organizational goals are, what kind of the attitude, the temperature is of our company. But ultimately, we want to take those people that we've deemed to be a part of us, and we want to put them on the right seats on that bus. So what I mean by that is after we've said, hey, this person fits our criteria, it's absolutely what we want to see, then we go back and we ask them, well, what do you want to do here? You fit our requirements. What is it that you want to do? And sure, we might have short-term needs or goals or things like that in departments where somebody has to go somewhere in order to fill that. But in reality, we want to know what seat do you want to be on this bus? And then we do everything we can in order to work with them in order to get them on that right seat. So cutting out the negative impact on your people. In order for us to get the right people on the bus and then ultimately start to work towards putting them in the right seats on that bus, we have to take kind of a good look at what we have going on right now. And I like to use the example that we had. We had a CNC operator. We had one CNC at the time. He was the only person that knew how to run this machine, but he was probably the most negative human being I've ever met. Every single thing was a complaint. He was always in everybody's ears, and you could always just tell how much creativity he sucked from everybody else. And it was very unfortunate to see, because you had people that wanted to thrive, they wanted to prosper, but you also had this extremely negative impact on our culture off to the side. And the only reason he stayed was because we made justifications that he needed to be there because, oh my gosh, he's the only one that knows how to run our CNC. And we use that fear or that ability to stop us from making the correct decision and putting our culture first. We're more worried about making sure that parts run on something, or we're more worried about making sure that this person that gets sales but impacts the rest of the sales department is there, versus actually making sure that our culture comes first and understanding that it is a short-term impact that you might go through by getting rid of that person and having to go through the training process, and ultimately how much of a positive it's going to have for the rest of your culture. So to put a few numbers behind that, because I know people like to hear about that, when we first started down this path, it wasn't very hard because we had tons of turnover, but we lost probably about 20% of our staff due to this. Either people who just didn't want to get on board, they didn't want to be a team player, they weren't a part of who we wanted to be, and ultimately either through us needing to get rid of them or through them walking out the door, we lost about 20% of our staff. And sure, that had a massive impact on our operational excellence at that point. But again, the whole thing about this is long-term goals, not short-term goals. Short-term, sure, we had struggles, we had fights, but long-term, we had people that wanted to be there, people that fit within our culture, and ultimately people that are prospering greatly today. So we figured out who's a part of our team, part of our family, a part of our culture. We've potentially gotten rid of that negative impact. Yes, sir.
Have you found that you shift people to your culture? They're kind of shaky coming in?
Yeah, great question. So his question was, do you think that you can shift people to your culture, or people that aren't necessarily 100% on board when you first start, right? Is that the question? So yeah, you absolutely can. And as we dive in here, as leaders, as people in potential positions to be able to get rid of or keep people, a lot of the times our easiest thing to do is just to fire somebody, right? And that's ultimately not what I'm talking about, and we'll explain that more as we go on. You have to do everything within your power, eliminate all excuses first, and make it something so that it is prosperous for them. So yeah, we've seen a lot of people. I call it our scales of culture. So when we first started really focusing on our company, we started giving our people the time in order to improve, do all these different types of things. I probably had about 5% of people that actually drank the Kool-Aid, understood the value, were actually on board. The rest weren't on board at all, and the other ones were probably just going through the motions because they were motivated by the paycheck that they were getting. So I would say today we're probably at about a 60% rate where people actually physically are bought into it. They understand the value behind it, and they're working on it. So absolutely, it takes time, it takes work, it takes the dedication behind it, but people will. That scale will start to tip for yourself, and it'll continue to get better and better as you go. Ultimately, when you're first starting, people think that it's the next flavor of the month, right? We've all been in situations where somebody comes out and starts spewing some stuff, and it's great for about 30 days. It starts to get hard, and then it just kind of doesn't happen anymore, right? And everybody goes back to what they were doing. So in order for us to do that, we have to show that we're serious about it. We have to stay in there. We have to continue to grind in there, and we have to show. And you have to show for 3-4 years that this isn't going away. And as you continue to show that this is serious, this isn't just the next flavor of the month, more and more people start to get on board. Great question, thank you. So interviewing. Interviewing is a really funny thing for me. I've probably interviewed, I don't know, 1,000 people at this point. I still do all of the interviewing for our facility, both on the office side and in the factory. As I am still continuing to grow and learn, that's one piece of control that I haven't been able to get rid of yet. My justification for that is I am so paranoid about our culture and our people that I want to be the gatekeeper for who I let into our yard, into our place. We have this incredible prosperous culture where people are uplifting, they're respectful of one another, and I'm extremely afraid of letting a potential negative impact infiltrate my facility. So I either need to, number one, start training people, but that's not getting off topic. So interviewing is really funny because usually a person comes in, you've got this list of corny questions that you're getting ready to ask them, and you want to hear some type of answer or something, and it's, something that you've Googled or read in an interviewing book somewhere or something. But in reality, it doesn't mean anything. In about 5 to 10 minutes, I know if you're going to be a good fit for our company. The rest of the time I take and the rest of the time I spend explaining to them who we are. I want to give them an accurate representation of who we are as a company. No smoke screens, no fluff in the situation, none of that. You come in, you get to see the good, the bad, the ugly, but everything we're about. It's literally like going out on a first date and then getting married, right? I mean, it is, because you have one opportunity to actually meet somebody, and then the next thing you know, they're a part of your culture. They're getting a paycheck from you. They've infiltrated your society, and now they're either going to be a positive impact for that, or they're going to be very negative. So you have to make absolutely sure that they have a good representation and expectation of what it is that you are looking for in a person. So 90% of my interviewing process is showing them. The great part is either say, hey, yep, I want to be a part of this, or you know what, thank you, I don't feel like I want to be that engaged. The other great thing is that somebody might think that you're full of crap or just, painting a picture or something. And they usually last in our facility for, I'm not kidding, about 2 days. Yes, sir.
So in those first 5 minutes, how do you determine that the applicant has a positive attitude coming in or looking back at previous jobs?
Great, thank you. Great question. So he's asking, how do you determine whether that person fits within what I'm deeming as being a part of my criteria, right? And that leads me to my next point. So the type of people that we're looking for, who we're hitting on. I don't care if a person has 30 years worth of woodworking experience. I don't care that they have ran a CNC for the last 15 years. If anything, they're probably jaded and they've probably been at, some crazy place and they have a bunch of bad habits, and it's actually probably going to be more work for me than it actually is going to be a benefit for me bringing them into there. So we look for two things. We look for a good attitude and we look for aptitude. And within 5 to 10 minutes, you have a good understanding whether a person, you talk to them a little bit about previous employment. Most people who have a negative attitude just rip on their previous employer for about 5 minutes, and that's usually a good thing. But, I will leave this a little bit generalized because I don't know everybody's specific criteria or your specific businesses, right? But you have to look for somebody that's got a good attitude, somebody that's positive, somebody that's ready to be problem solving. And then ultimately, somebody that has the aptitude, somebody who's going to be intelligent enough to take those things on and be that problem solver, learn the things that you're going to teach them, and move on from there. Did I answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Oh. All right. So creating goals, I know everybody talks about goals. Long-term goals, short-term goals, immediate goals, and then make your people a part of them. What I want to hit on for goals, because they are obviously important. The biggest thing that I see most people make mistakes on is we make company goals, we make financial goals. We want to target this industry. We want to make X amount of dollars next year. We want to reduce this. None of it ever has to do with, in the next 5 years, I want to make a culture and I want to make a company that has a 0% turnover rate. Or the only person that ever leaves my facility is because they're going on to go do their ultimate dream, to start their own business, whatever the case may be, but never because they feel as if they have a better opportunity somewhere else. nobody ever focuses on the cultural aspect of how important goals are and getting long-term goals. We'll look at, oh, we're going to need to be 100 employees in order for us to hit $25 million in sales or something like that. But we don't ever talk about our long-term goal to sustain having 100 people in our facility. And so I digress back to, our two things that we talk about and what we do, and that's to grow people. Because if we're growing our people and our long-term goals are focused on their success, all those other things that we create goals for are just going to happen. If we have a good product and we're selling that product appropriately and we're focusing on our company and our people, all the rest of the stuff will take place. So make sure that when you're looking at long-term goals and you're looking at the financial aspect of it and you're trying to reduce cost here and you're trying to make X sales here, a part of that pie should be, how do I engage our employees here? What do we want to do with our employees? What do we want to do with ourselves? What do we want our company to be? And then obviously you have to have short-term goals. So, that's something 5, 10 years out. A short-term goal is I'm going to make sure that I start to provide training for people. And then immediate goals is having them become a part of them. An immediate goal would be going back and be like, hey, what's your goal in the next 5 years? What do you want to do? If you don't have a company where you actually have people that are engaged in it, they'll probably look at you with a deer in headlights, because nobody's ever asked them that question before. 90% of my staff that I have on board has been job after job, head down, being told what to do over and over again. And the second I say, hey, what do you want to do in the next 5 years? They're like, huh? And that's a very powerful thing, because if you get that look or people don't understand that, then you need to make sure that you're training them, you're opening them up to be able to have the understanding that there are things that they can do out there. What do you want to do here? A manufacturer is one of the coolest places you can be in, because we have sales, we have marketing, we have engineering, we have technical. You have every facet of almost every business in your one facility. The amount of opportunity that a person has when they come to your facility is out of this world. But most people don't know that, because manufacturing is this dark, dingy, dusty, crappy place that you go to and your parents told you, hey, don't do what I did, go somewhere else. That responsibility falls back on us to change the perception of the next generation of potential employees that you have coming into your facilities. And we do that by making them a part of the goals. Maybe. Yeah, let's see it. So empowering our employees. We've got our general, or what most millennial generations or younger generations think of manufacturing. This is what they think of. They think when you go to a manufacturer, all creativity is going to be lost. You're going to put your head down. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over all day long. And then when you don't do your job right, some supervisor is going to come over and beat you over the head, in this case, literally. So how do we change that perception? Well, we do the biggest, absolute biggest thing that we can do for employees, and that's empower them. Give them the opportunity to fail. And when I say give them the opportunity to fail, I mean get the heck out of their way and let them fail. I spent all my time in the Marine Corps putting out fires for my junior Marines. And basically, you become the best micromanager firefighter on the planet, because you got to make sure somebody's eating, somebody's sleeping, they're changing their socks, they're drinking water. There's all these different types of things, and we put the life and death scenario on it, which makes you hypersensitive to anybody failing, right? But we have this beautiful opportunity in a civilian environment. If somebody cuts a part wrong, nobody's dying, right? What's the worst thing that's going to possibly happen? They learn why they cut it wrong. Your accountant makes a mistake somewhere and misses something, right? Yeah, it might have massive financial repercussions, but there's nothing that can't be peeled back there. What we do is we walk around all day long afraid that somebody's going to screw up and that we need to come parachuting in and put out the fire before it happens. And what we do is we suck all the motivation, all the potential learning opportunity out of every single person that we do that to. Instead of coming in and saying, hey, don't do something like this is what's going to happen, sit back, let it actually take place. Because all they're going to do is look at you and be like, great, he's telling me what to do again. Versus giving them the opportunity to fail, actually learn from it, and here's something even crazier, making them be the ones that fix it. Okay, you screwed it up. No big deal. How do we solve it? You're putting all of that back on them. Most people, if we're looking at it, and we'll get into it a little bit, are looking for you to come save the day anyways, because it makes their lives easier. Now they get to be lazy and don't need to do anything because they know you're going to come rushing in anyways. So how does anybody learn? How do we move on? Well, you have to give them the opportunity to fail. Literally, if there's nothing else you take away from this, you've got to be able to restrain yourself, allow your people to fail, and then when that happens, make sure you're focused on why they failed and the process of how they failed, not them specifically and beating them over the head because they failed. We were having a little bit of a discussion before, and we talk about like my father's generation, grandfather's generation. They came in, they put their heads down, they went to work. And everybody was a really hard worker, and that was the values back then. That's the same value today. The biggest difference between today and back then is the fact that now people know that they have brains, and they actually want to use their brains. They don't want to just come in, put their head down for 8 hours, collect a paycheck, and go back home. They actually want to be a part of your business, a part of your company, a part of your department, whatever it is, and actually help you make that better, which is so cool. So when we let them fail, we get out of their way, you're actually opening up a resource that you never knew you had, and that's people who care, which is extremely powerful. But in order for us to do that, we also have to trust our employees. And if we think our employees stink, or that they're always going to screw up, and nobody does it better than me, well then what the heck do you have all the rest of these people here that you're paying, right? If they can't do their job that you hired them to do, then don't have them there. But in reality, you hired them to do their job, and ultimately you know they can do their job. That's why you hired them, or that's why they're in your facility. So let them do that. And nobody's perfect. I fail about 900 times a day. I screw up, I make a mistake constantly. And then I learn from it. You have to give everybody else the opportunity to do so. The other way that you empower your employees is kind of like what we talked about with goals. You give them the voice, you allow them to be heard, and not just on goal-based things, but on improvement type of things, on potentially, how a line is going to be run, where we go financially next year. What do you think about how we're going to market our company over the following year? Let their voice be heard. Bring them to the table. Not everything needs to happen in a little box with 2 or 3 people somewhere. Have your entire company involved. The way that we do that is we do an hour every single morning. So our factory works Monday through Thursday, 7 to 5:30. Our office works Monday through Friday, roughly 7 to 4-ish, 3:30. Every single person comes in, 7 o'clock in the morning. From 7 to 8 o'clock, we don't work on anything production related, and they focus on fixing what bugs them, which is something that's starting to become really cool in the lean environment. But fixing what bugs you is so huge. So nobody ever complains about something, because if you complain about it, you should be fixing it, right? So the autonomy is completely on them. We get rid of any negative impact on that, or people that just want to complain about anything. But we give them the opportunity to actually solve problems. And when I first started doing it, I was extremely skeptical. I was like, it's just going to be me running around for the first hour, making sure that everybody's actually staying busy. But you know what happened over about 6 months? We made huge improvements to our entire facility. And I'm going to share something with you guys, and it's really cool. And I've been doing this for a little bit. But we started a Disney project roughly 2 years ago. We finished it about 6 months ago, and I sat down and I did all of the pricing for what our direct labor was going to be for that job. Based off of where we were at that time frame, where we stood, it was going to require 12 direct factory employees in it. We were going to be able to produce 32 beds a week, and it was going to take us just under 3 years in order to accomplish it. The actual indirect labor cost for that was $1.9 million that we were going to spend on employees to build our product. 2 weeks ago, I went back and I took a look, because we're looking at the pricing of our product and the fact that we have actually increased productivity. We've made processes more efficient. We're actually trying to drop the price of our product, not raise it. And I went back and I looked. We did that job in a year and a half the time it took. We didn't invest a single dollar into it other than giving our employees an hour every morning. We were producing 80 beds a week, literally quadrupling the amount of what, or tripling the amount that we were doing, and we only spent $800,000 in labor. We had a $1.1 million savings in labor because we let people actually fix what bugged them in the morning. And most people, and I'll be preemptive about it, most people are like, oh my gosh, you must spend so much money letting those people just do whatever they want for an hour every morning. We do. We spend $130,000 a year for that hour every morning. But ultimately, over a year and a half, we saved over $1 million in labor. And that's why we got the 2017 Supplier of the Year. So it is extremely, extremely important that we make sure that we empower our employees. But again, hardest part, releasing the control, not being the one that needs to step in and take care of all that stuff. Any questions about anything? Everybody's doing good?
Yeah, can you give, for instance, then, of that time from 7 to 8, like what would be a particular thing somebody would fix?
Great question. So an example of what we do during that first hour, right? So we do a lot of things. We do 3S'ing. We make sure our areas are clean. We make sure all of our forklifts are maintained. We will make sure that we do the maintenance on all of our machines. We have 2 panel saws in a Telestore, 2 edge banders, 4 CNC machines. We got a lot of machinery, right? And it doesn't matter if you have 1 machine or 100 machines. They need to be maintained. Nobody ever wants to set down their maintenance schedules or stop production because we're so afraid to stop production. Oh my gosh, we got to keep these things running. And then it never happens until it just dies on us. And then now it's a rush and we're rushing parts in and doing all those things. So we do all of our preventative maintenance then. We do all of our 3S'ing, keeping our facility clean, no dust on the ground, keeping our standards up. And then everybody also has the individual ability to go in and take care of stuff. So, you know, instead of us spending $5,000 on this crane that comes down for a drill, one of our guys on the floor literally made a gantry out of 2x4s and stuff that keep the hose out of his way. And he's taken our bed platform station from like literally being able to do 3 bed platforms a day, and they can do over 100 bed platforms a day, just by little incremental improvements every single day. Stop picking things up off the ground, you know, all those different types of things. Good? Cool. Yes?
Do you acknowledge them for their contributions?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So after we have our, she asked, do you acknowledge people for making their contributions, right? So the one thing that we don't do is we don't have a bonus program or anything like that. Our philosophy is that if you use money as a motivator, then that's where all of your kind of motivation goes to. So now people are only making improvements because they know they're going to get a check behind it or something like that. So anything we do from a monetary standpoint, number one, we just pay our people above standard, you know, better salaries than what our area does. So they're just paid really well. And then if we do really well that year, at the end of the year, we, you know, help people out, give bonuses at the end of the year, before Christmas, all those type of things. But we don't ever make anything expected. That's the biggest thing. Because we all know, I mean, I get bonuses. Christmas time comes, I want my bonus, man. You know what I mean? And it doesn't necessarily correlate with you actually being more motivated, right? So we always try to leave the monetary aspect of it out. And I always try to leave the monetary aspect of it out when a person makes a mistake. I don't necessarily like to go into them and say, hey, like this mistake cost us ... right? So you got to make sure you leave that out. So the way that we do award our people is after we do that first hour every morning, we do what we call our morning meeting. A different person leads that meeting every day. So we have 52 people in our facility. Literally every single one of those 52 people will lead a meeting, and it goes round robin. And it's really great, breaks it down, gives a ton of respect between everybody, because public speaking is very fearful for some. So they get an opportunity to do that, really like very humbling, but we go over our improvements. They make videos of their improvements. More importantly, we go over our mistakes. We talk about our mistakes. We create an environment that allows people to talk about their mistakes and not think they're going to lose their job. We do lessons of the day, and we use that as our opportunity to be kind of like a really good group and get everybody together. So that's how we do that. All right. So one of the biggest struggles that I see for people when we're trying to get a culture started and things just aren't going is how that they are actually leading the fight, right? And I'm a military guy, so a lot of things will be a fight or infiltrate or military type terms. But in reality, we have to take a big look in the mirror and say, hey, why aren't people engaged? Why aren't they getting on board? Why aren't they doing these type of things? Well, there's a few different types of supervisors. We saw one in the Charlie Chaplin video where the guy's beating everybody over the head and not actually training or teaching everybody. And that's kind of one extreme of it. The extreme that I love, and I thank the Japanese for this because we do this really well in the Marine Corps, is servant leadership. And we call it leading from the front. The Japanese call it servant leadership, or showing your back. Being out there, being in the fight with them, making sure that you're helping them solve problems when they become too hard. We forget, because we're putting out fires so often, that our jobs as leaders are actually to be there in a supportive role for everybody else who's providing value to your company. So we have 11 leaders between team leaders, supervisors, floor leaders. I meet with them twice a week, and we go over leadership traits, and we talk about leadership, and we do all those things, right? Because they are going to be the direct result, either positive result or negative result, on if your people actually start to adapt to the culture that you want to provide. Because if your leadership is out there running around beating everybody over the head, then your culture isn't going to change because you're not giving them the opportunity to. So you have to work with your leadership, and ultimately you have to work with yourself to make sure that you're being that servant. Make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to ensure that everybody that is doing a job for you has every tool or every piece of information they need in order to get that job done. Your job isn't there to supervise, look over their shoulder, micromanage them, tell them how terrible they're doing or what they're doing wrong and all those type of things. You are there to make sure that you're a resource for them when they need something, bottom line. And that is very, very important, because we're not just there to say, yes, you did a good job, or no, you didn't do a good job. You're there because you have experience, and ultimately you can say those things. But if somebody doesn't do a good job, then why didn't they do a good job? And you need to start working with them in order to explain that. So we talked about showing your back a little bit. Japanese talk about it like physically being on the floor in the problem area, showing your back because you're in it. So everybody, your leadership team or your group should be looking at your back because you're physically in there taking care of the problem and helping solve that problem with them. And then staying in our lanes. So I've been lucky enough or unlucky enough to kind of dabble in every aspect of our company, be it accounting or whatever. But as a director of operations, I'm not running HR, I'm not running accounting, I'm overseeing all these things, sales, all this type of stuff. But I'm not hopping in there and taking over their jobs every second. I'm staying in my lane. I'm doing my thing. I'm being that servant leader. I'm making sure that I'm providing them, being a resource for them so that they can do their jobs appropriately. Too many times I see leadership people bounce all around their facility and just plug into every single piece that they seem or deem necessary, and they don't stay in their role or where they're supposed to be with it. So we need to make sure we're staying in our lane. All right. Continuous improvement. So it goes back to empowering our employees. And the only way that you can empower your employee is by giving them a voice, letting them fail, and making sure that you're giving them the opportunity to improve on those things that they've learned about, right? So comes from the Toyota production system, stems from the word Kaizen. Kaizen means improvement, large improvement. Management and engineers doing all the work. I bring this up because a lot of the facilities I see and the way that we used to do things is, the manager would do it, or an engineer would come out and say, hey, I want this improvement done, or I need this improvement done, et cetera. And basically just give another task to everybody else down the line, and it's never really their improvement. If you're going to do continuous improvement, everybody has to be a part of it, not just management, not just engineers. Don't make them the Charlie Chaplin factory worker. Any questions? We're all good? All right, so training. Biggest thing with training is don't be the easy target. How many people here have had a person come and ask them the same question like 3 times? Right? I do all the time. Like, hey, how do we do this? And like, you're so into that firefighter type of mentality that you don't even realize it. You get so good at being able to answer questions that you don't even realize the moment where you need to pause and say, hey, why is this person asking me this question again? I've already answered it. Well, that's because you have become the easy target. You have given them an avenue to not have to worry about anything, not have the autonomy to do it, and you always answer it for them. So it's a gauge for me. If somebody comes in and they ask me a question twice, first time, sure. Second time, absolutely not. And we go over why weren't you able to retain it? What do we not have in our facility that's allowing a person to retain it? What process don't we have that's allowing us to eliminate this question, and making sure that we're not doing that? We do that for questions, but we do that for everything. When you're jumping in and you're firefighting everything, you're taking that autonomy away, you're sucking all the training out of your potential opportunities. And the biggest one is focusing on the process, not the person. So my leadership team, whenever they come into my office, they know that they're physically not allowed to say a person's name. They're not allowed to say he, we, she, anything that describes a person. When they have a problem and they come into my office, or we're out there on the floor working through things, they have to be like, we have this problem at this machine, this part. It has to be about the process. Nobody is ever allowed to be tied to those processes. Because man, as humans, we love blaming one another. We love pointing that finger at one another. And we love saving our butts, writing that extra email to make sure we've got that sucker down in writing. So when this thing hits the fan, I can say, oh, I wrote my email. It's his fault, her fault, right? And that's not what it's about. Why? It's not. It has nothing to do with fault. It's all about the process. We want to make processes that eliminate the potential for human error, correct, right? But ultimately, from a cultural standpoint, we want to eliminate it so not everybody's protecting their butts and pointing the finger at one another. So that when a person makes a mistake, their coworker, their peer, their leader puts their arms around them and says, hey, how do we fix this? How do we take care of this? And that does 2 things. Number 1, you're solving your problems. They're actually getting fixed. They don't happen again. And number 2, you know about all your problems. So if you know about all your problems, then you can fix it. But when people are afraid that they're going to get burned, or people are afraid that they're going to get the finger pointed at them, or you're going to blame them and not the process, then they start hiding everything. And now you have a much bigger issue than you ever anticipated because you only know about a fraction of the actual issues that are occurring in your facility. New people, new people, new people. I love new people. New people are the best. Most of the times we don't have good training programs in place. We chuck them to the wolves and cross our fingers and hope they survive. But in reality, they're a unicorn in your facility. It doesn't matter how great your culture is. It doesn't matter what it is. Your company is your company. You all have blinders on at your company. Everybody in our facility has blinders on. The only people that don't have blinders are new people in your facility. They're thinking outside the box the second they walk through the door because they don't know about everything that you know about. They haven't had the time to put the blinders on and learn about all the intricacies of your particular place, right? So it always blows my mind when we take this new person and we like chuck them in the back corner somewhere. When in reality, we should be like touring them through the facility and being like, hey, what do you think about this? What about this? What about this? Because they're thinking about things from such a different perspective, they will actually help you. Some of our biggest improvements we've ever had were the simplest ones and like such bonehead things, and it was from a new person coming in and just being like, hey, why don't we do that? And everybody's like, oh my gosh, like why didn't we think of that? And that's why, because we treat them literally like a unicorn and we bring them around and we make them a part of it immediately, not chuck them in the back corner and maybe we see them in 6 months because they survived their initial greeting period or whatever you want to call it, right? And then ultimately the training is a tough thing because the burden falls on you. You have to stop making the justifications behind why you're not getting people the adequate training that they need. And sure, usually it's financial. But there are many different ways that you can train your people that don't put a massive financial impact on you. But I will say, if you put the financial investment in your people it will have a very positive outcome for you. And it's always a good return on investment. But that burden falls on you. Have to stop making the justifications, have to start getting good training programs in place. Your quality will go through the roof, your defect levels will go down, your people will be smarter, they'll be making better improvements, and it's just all around the most positive thing that you can do. And then again, don't ever get to status quo or, hey, we just learned enough. Make sure we're continuously learning. So where do you start? Well, that's a great question. For people that have 10 employees, it's going to be a much easier task for you than a company that's got 100 employees. That's just the bottom line. Don't use the excuse that you have 100 employees to be the reason why you don't do something. Be grateful that you've got 100 employees, because that's 100 people that you can touch, right? That's 100 people that you can impact. Sure, it's going to be more work. It's all work. Everything is work. We've got to work in order to do it. So first place that we started was in the bathroom. The bathroom is a very cool place. It's like the one place that we go to at work. It's kind of the most intimate place, right? You're sharing things, washing your hands, using the restroom, all those good things. It's amazing how many places you walk into and how disgusting their bathrooms are. But to me, that's a gauge to how much respect there is within the company. Because if you can go to the bathroom and you can't clean up after yourself, you obviously do not care about anybody else in that facility, right? Bottom line. But if you go into a place where it's clean, people are wiping the sinks down, they're cleaning up the toilets after they've gone out of it, man, they respect it because they know somebody else is going to have to come in there and use that. And I don't want to go to the bathroom and leave it a mess and then make somebody else who I spend, half my time with live in my disgust. Like, that's not what it's about. So it's a good gauge to understand where a company's at from a cultural standpoint. If you have a really clean bathroom, that's awesome. If it's because you have an outside cleaning staff that you pay way too much money to, you might want to rethink that, right? But if you have a bathroom that is disgusting, it is a great indicator or red flag that the respect level for one another and inside that facility probably could use some improvement. So that's where we started. What we did was we kicked out our cleaning staff, our cleaning crew. We said, thank you for everything, but we're going to take care of it ourselves. And we started cleaning our own bathrooms. Specifically, I did the first week, and it was disgusting. And I cleaned the whole thing and kept it clean and all that stuff, created the standard for everybody else, showed everybody else that nobody's more important than anybody else here, and we started it. And we've been cleaning our bathroom for 3.5 years now, and it's spotless and immaculate. And if you're ever in New York, you can come use our restrooms. All right? So when I say stick with it, I mean stick with it. Like, you gotta stick with it. It's, again, not a flavor of the month. When you start somewhere, start small. Do just literally the bathroom, and make sure that that bathroom stays as clean as it could possibly be forever. And don't ever relinquish what you guys have gained in that area, right? And I'm using the bathroom metaphorically. Start wherever you need to or wherever you feel most appropriate. But once you do, don't back off. Stick with it. Because again, everybody is looking for that flavor of the month, and they're going to test buttons, they're going to try procedures, they're going to do all those things. Use it as a tool, use it as a motivation to get better and better and better. And then this is one that I just absolutely love. It's cheaper, faster, better, easier. We always want to make everything cheaper, then we want to make it faster, then we want to make it better, and then we want to make it easier. What we do is we flip that absolutely upside down, and we focus on making everything easier, which in turn increases the quality of our product, which ends up being a faster production and operations, right? And ultimately, it is cheaper. So, before we get into any questions, I put a list of some of the books that have been just super duper beneficial for me that I listen to over and over again. The top part of that list is more of the warm and fuzzy cultural aspect for people and different types of things. Advantage is incredible. It's actually in a list of how I believe you should read them. And then the second part is more of the nitty-gritty down to actually lean brass tacks type of scenario. Toyota Production System, or the Toyota Way, gets into how to implement lean, what 3S is about, the different types of scenarios and all those things that go into it. But they're really great. And I recommend the Advantage and 2-Second Lean above anything else.
What are you doing to attract people that you'd like to hire?
Yeah, so that's an incredible question. He asked what we do to attract people. So from a factory standpoint, I've not had to hire anybody outside of our facility in roughly a year, I'll say. It is all referral based. So our entire facility is referral based now because everybody loves working there and they want to work there. We were jokingly talking about the fact as the woodworking industry, especially the ones that are close to us, you know, I was in a competition with every mom and pop cabinet shop in the area. And we'd have this employee that would just bounce around between the 5 and 6 cabinet shops. And by the time they got to the 5th one, next thing you knew, our hourly wage for all of our employees had increased by $4. Because every time they do that, that's what happens. So number one, we focus on making sure that nobody ever wants to leave. And if everybody else isn't there, that's too bad. Better for us, right? But ultimately, it's all referral based. Everything else, we go through the normal gamut. We go through Craigslist, Indeed, Monster, all the good stuff in order to get it. And we just go through a ton of people. But the other really cool thing that we do outside of that, and not just looking specifically in the woodworking industry, is where we're willing to pick potential talent from. I think 70% of my factory employees come from a culinary background. Either they were a line cook, they were a chef, they were a waiter or a waitress. I don't know what it is, and I'm just throwing it out there, but it's a very interesting statistic. But more importantly, we're not concerned about getting people who have, you know, been in carpentry or been in construction. Again, the attitude and aptitude is something that is much more important to us. And that's where we're looking from it. Thank you. Answer your question? Sort of. Okay, sorry. Any other questions?
Guys that are coming underneath them, how do you retain them and keep them wanting to grow with the company when they're going into the job?
Yeah, so you're talking about once a company kind of stabilizes out and there's not just like tons of room for advancement? Is that what you're talking about? So, you know, potentially a very motivated person, kind of an entry-level position, how do you keep them motivated when there isn't necessarily that leadership position opening up right away? Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. So it's a great question. And the one thing we focus on is being career-oriented. So again, a lot of people come in, even if they're young, they still have this thought process behind them that this is just the next job. That this is just, you know, they've been at jobs, they're going to the next job until that job doesn't pan out. A lot of people aren't career-oriented. They don't think about it from a career standpoint. So the way that we will supplement, you know, not being a world beater or potentially that instant gratification that I definitely see a lot. You know, most people, they've been busting their butt, they've been doing a great job for 6 months. They want to have like, you know, my job, right? And it's like, you got to slow down a little bit. So showing them patience, teaching them patience, but ultimately showing them the longevity. You know, this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. And then backing that up with, you know, a 401k, things like that, that'll actually help them grow. And you know, as you grow, they will grow, and ultimately those positions open up. So we do it from a position standpoint or a billet type of standpoint, and we also do it from an economy type of standpoint, basically like, you know, good things that make you want to stick around and do that. Hopefully that helped. Did you have a particular incident you wanted to go over? Okay, deal. Yes, miss.
First of all, I would like to say thank you for our service to our country, and anybody here who has served for our country, I'd like to say thank you. What was the catalyst for Innova to take on these principles? They didn't start out like this, correct?
Sure.
What did this?
Yeah.
What made this happen?
So Lauren Sherman is the owner of our company. I call him the mad scientist. He's the creator of our product. He's also very creative in general. He was a set designer for Broadway, etc. And he doesn't have a good operational type of mindset behind him or skill set or tool set. So when I came into Innova, again, you know, it was about 18,000 square feet. It was an incredible amount of turnover. I started personally learning about lean and thinking about lean, and ultimately starting to try to apply some of my military background and leadership background that I had. And I caught resistance forever. And it's a really great question. because we all catch resistance. It's not like, this just opportunity opens up and everything becomes roses and butterflies. I spent probably about 2.5 to 3 years at the company just trying to convince the ownership that this was actually something that was plausible and something that we should take on. For us, unfortunately, but fortunately, it had gotten to such a bad point that they just gave me a shot and were like, well, what the heck? This can't hurt. It can't get any worse. And they ultimately gave me the autonomy to run the operational aspect of it and backed off. Stopped being a firefighter, stopped being that micromanager, gave me the ability, trusted me to do it, and let me run with it. And, again, being a person who likes to be motivated because I'm using my brain, not just going in and collecting a paycheck, it has kept me on a steady stream of motivation because I love spending every single year saving the company $1.1 million in labor and doing those different types of things. And it's an incredible, incredible thing. So it's not going to be something that's easy up front. When I told the owners of my company that I wanted to let everybody screw around for the first hour every morning, it caught a ton of resistance. But ultimately, through little things, getting rid of the cleaning crews, sustaining that, bringing that in, and marginal gains, continuous improvement, you start to create something really great. Thank you. All right, any more questions? Well, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it.